Hi, and welcome back to Heimler's History. Now, we've been going through Unit 7 of AP World History, and we've just got out of World War I. Now, I went ahead and spoiled it in another video, but there is, in fact, a World War II, and that's crazy because the people who fought the Great War, which is what World War I was known as before there was a World War II, they said this was the war to end all wars. And yet, 20 years after the ink was dry on the Treaty of Versailles, there was another global war. So the purpose of this video is to talk about the causes of World War II. In the next one, we're going to talk about how the war was actually carried on, but this one, just the causes. Let's get to it. Now, if we ask the historical record what caused World War II, then we're given answers that have to do with, number one, an unsustainable peace treaty in the Treaty of Versailles and the rise of the Nazi Party in Germany. Now, to be fair, Japan was also doing its part to start the war, but we'll get to them near the end. But for now, let's consider why the Treaty of Versailles, which was the treaty that ended World War I, was an unsustainable peace agreement. Now, what's kind of astonishing is that it's not just historians who live now who have the benefit of hindsight who say, yeah, that was unsustainable. It's people who were living in that time who saw the provisions of peace with their own eyes who said, yeah, this is going to lead us to another war. One such person was a French general named Ferdinand Foch, and upon the signing of the treaty, he was reported to have said, this is not peace, it is an armistice for 20 years. And what's crazy is that World War I ended in 1918 and World War II began in 1939, which is to say 21 years. So he was off by a year, but man, he nailed it. So what was it that people like Foch could see in that treaty that so plainly announced? There's some flaws here. First, the treaty demanded that the Germans pay reparations to the tune of billions of dollars to repair the damage done by the war. And you didn't have to be a genius to realize that such a provision was going to ruin the German economy, and it did. Then if you add a worldwide Great Depression and a profound level of hyperinflation, the German economy would be on the brink of utter collapse. Second, the German treaty mandated that the Allied forces occupy the Rhineland, which was a strip of German land between the French and German border. And as you probably might have guessed from our study of world history up to this point, ain't nobody like to be occupied by nobody. Third was the war guilt clause of the treaty, and this was the clause in which Germans were made to accept full responsibility for the war and all the destruction caused by it. So put all these things together, and during the interwar period, not only are the Germans suffering profoundly in economic terms, but they are also being humiliated on the world stage. And as my grandpappy used to say, if you humiliate a nation on a world stage in a peace treaty, be careful that you don't get the Nazis. Well, thank you, grandpappy. That is a remarkably prescient statement. So all of that to say, we can pin this cause of the war squarely on the Allied powers, specifically Britain and France, and even more specifically France, for codifying in the treaty their desire to punish Germany. And that brings us to the second major cause of World War II, and that is the rise of the Nazi Party. And this one we're going to go ahead and pin squarely on the Germans. So I already mentioned all the suffering and humiliation the Germans were made to bear after World War I, and out of this mess, a man rose through the ranks of German politics with a plan to fix it, and his name was Adolf Hitler. Now, after World War I ended, the German Kaiser was replaced with a parliamentary-style government, namely the Weimar Republic. Now, because the policies of the Weimar Republic didn't do much to stem the tide of economic collapse and suffering of the German people, they saw this government as pretty weak, and so they longed for a stronger central government that could actually solve their problem. And it's here where I need to introduce you to a political party called the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or if you're not into saying all that, the Nazi Party. Now, the Nazis took power in the German parliament in 1932, and we need to stop for a second because that thing that I just said about them taking power, because we have certain ideas in our heads when we say the word Nazis, that can be misinterpreted. I said that they took power in parliament. You might be tempted to think that they rolled in with tanks and guns and took over power in a military coup. But no, the Nazis were, wait for it, elected to their position. It was totally democratic and legit. The people actually liked the Nazi platform and put them in power. And so what was it about their platform that actually appealed to the people? Well, among other things, they advocated for the nullification of the Treaty of Versailles, for the purification of the German population, and for a stronger central authority who could fix the problems of the German people. Now, by 1933, Adolf Hitler is appointed Chancellor of the German government, and by 1934, after the death of German President Paul von Hindenburg, Hitler declared himself president and began enacting policies close to his heart. These included a powerful and militaristic German nationalism. Also, there was what's called scientific racism, which is the claim that certain races were genetically superior to others. Related to that was Hitler's deep and abiding anti-Semitism, by which he claimed that Jews were responsible for all the nation's woes, and as a result, Germany could only be great if purged of the corrupting influence of the Jews. Now, the first major legislative push against the Jews of Germany was the Nuremberg laws. These were a set of discriminatory laws that essentially pushed Jews to the margins of society. And to add fuel to this fire, in 1938 a German diplomat was assassinated by a Jewish teenager. This event led to what's called in German Kristallnacht, which when being translated means Night of Broken Glass. It was a series of anti-Jewish riots in which Germans ended up killing 90 Jews and destroying nearly every Jewish synagogue in the city. In addition, over 30,000 Jews were arrested and sent to concentration camps. Now, most of these would be released from the camps and deported, but later prisoners would not get such treatment. Now, something else that loomed large in Hitler's imagination was the German need for what he called Lebensraum, or living space. And how much Lebensraum would Hitler need for his purified German people? Oh, I don't know. How about the whole dang European continent? Now, if you're all the other nations on the European continent, at this point you're getting a little twitchy because those are clearly fighting words. And in that vein, Hitler went ahead and made a military alliance with Italy in 1936 called the Rome-Berlin Axis. Also, Germany allied themselves with Japan in the Anti-COMINTERN Pact, and these three nations together would become known as the Axis powers in the war. A further cause of the war was Germany's aggressive militarism. Now, the Treaty of Versailles had a provision for this significant demilitarization of Germany. But the problem with that is when your sights are set on getting all that Lebensraum, you gotta have a lot of pew-pew in order to get the people out of it. So in March of 1935, Hitler broke the treaty and began to build up the German military, and he further broke the treaty by sending troops into the Rhineland in 1936. Now, at this move, Britain and France wagged their finger at Hitler and said, "Stop it." But that's basically all they did. For them, the policy of appeasement seemed the best way to keep from starting another world war. So, Hitler decided to go ahead and take some more land. Next up was Austria, which happened to be the place of Hitler's birth, and he threatened to invade and used the weight of that threat to pressure the Austrian Chancellor to give more power to the Nazi Party in Austria. Well, that happened, and then the Austrian Nazis basically welcomed Hitler to occupy Austria in 1938. And then came Czechoslovakia. There was a little strip of land called the Sudetenland that bordered Germany, and because most of the population there were German-speaking folks, Hitler demanded that the Sudetenland be ceded to Germany. And at this point, Hitler met with the leaders of Britain, France, and Italy to discuss this seizure of land. Here, British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain was convinced that appeasement of Hitler's desires was the best way to satisfy him and keep the peace. And so, in the Munich Agreement, everyone agreed that Hitler could have the Sudetenland, but no more. Now, look, that's it. You understand, right? Yeah. I mean, you occupied the Rhineland and we did nothing. Yeah. You took Austria and we didn't retaliate. Yeah. And now the Sudetenland is yours and you don't want anything else, right? Yeah. And so, as it happened, the Munich Agreement had the exact reverse effect. Hitler could see now clearly that whatever he did, Britain and France were not going to oppose him. And so, with the Sudetenland in his possession, he went ahead and invaded Czechoslovakia in 1939, and baby, now we're starting to get some Lebensraum. And let's just keep invading. Next up, Poland. Hitler set his sights now on the port of Danzig, and once this became known, Britain's policy of appeasement officially reached its end. Britain agreed to defend Poland in the case of a German invasion, and then they went ahead and allied themselves with Russia and France to this end. And you see where this is going. On September 1st, 1939, Hitler invaded Poland. And at that, the Allied powers declared war on Germany, and that's how you get a Second World War. Now, that's the crescendo of that story, but earlier I said I mentioned Japan, and so real quick, here's Japan. By the time all of this was going on in Europe, Japan had been encroaching on China and Korea for about half a century, and in 1937, fighting blew up between the Japanese and Chinese troops, and that battle marked the official beginning of the war in the Pacific Theater. Alright, that's what you need to know about Unit 7, Topic 6 of AP World History. Check out Review Packet if you need help getting an A in your class and a 5 on your exam in May. And if you want me to keep making videos for you, then subscribe and join the Heimler family. Heimler out.